Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. Since Twilight has been popping up recently, I had this brilliant idea to make a video that was Twilight themed. So today I'm going to be tier ranking every single published book that originated as Twilight fanfiction. I actually had to do a bit of research for this because there were so many more published Twilight fanfics than I even knew there was, and there are actually quite a few that I had already read that I had no idea originated as Twilight fanfic, and most if not all the books that I'm going to be talking about today are Edward and Bella fanfic. Some of these authors had me shook that they started writing through Twilight fanfiction and that some of my favorite books of theirs were originally fanfic. I'm not really gonna go into the whole ethics thing and whether, the books should have been written or published, blah blah blah. That's not the point of this video. This is just me tier ranking the books based on their enjoyment value, their entertainment value, and just how much I liked reading those books. I personally never really got into fan fiction. I never really read it, much less wrote it, and I definitely did not get into Twilight fan fiction. I mean, I did love the books growing up. I first discovered them when I was in 6th grade. I read them all by 7th or 8th grade. I love the books. I was totally obsessed, though I wouldn't really call myself like a twihard. I didn't collect any merch or anything like that, but I did pre-order Breaking Dawn. It was actually the first book that I ever pre-ordered. I did enjoy the movies. I went to see all of them in theaters, and I have rewatched the series quite a few times. One of the best theater experiences was definitely during Breaking Dawn Part 2, during that whole battle. The part where everyone in the theater just gasped because of the plot twist. That I think about every once in a while. So I did love the books, though I haven't really reread them in about a decade, and I probably never will. But one of the amazing things that came out of Twilight is fanfic. If you didn't know what fanfiction is, it is basically like a piece of writing that uses someone else's characters. So Twilight fanfiction, the fans of the series wrote their own stories using Edward and Bella and all the other Cullens. They used Stephenie Meyer's characters to write their own stories, and some stories ended up being good enough to stand on their own and be published on their own, whether it was through a big publisher or just publishing it as an indie author. And today I'm going to be ranking about 30 books, like almost 30 books that I read that originated as Twilight fanfiction. This is not a comprehensive list of every single published book that originated as Twilight fanfiction because there are so many more than just 30. I actually read about 4 new ones over the past few days just for this video, but the majority of the ones that I have read, I read years and years ago, and most of them I didn't even know were Twilight fanfiction originally. And I probably might have even missed some that I have already read, and I just could not find whether it was originally fanfic or not. But if you have read any of the books on this list, any of the books that I'm going to be talking about, or if you read a book that I did not include in this list that is Twilight fanfiction, let me know your thoughts. Alright, so here is my tier ranking list. Starting from the top, my S tier are the books that I would reread a million times. My A tier, the books that are even better than Twilight, which is pretty high praise coming from me because I love the books. B tier are the books that I genuinely enjoyed, like very solid romances. C tier are the books that I kind of liked, like they're pretty average but still okay. D tier are the totally forgettable books. E tier are the books that should have been left in the drafts, and F tier are the books that I never ended up reading. To kick off this tier ranking list, I'm gonna rank the one that started it all. It is The Submissive by Tara Sue Me. So I'm partly joking, but kind of not, because I know everyone expected me to say 50 Shades of Grey, but apparently during my research I learned that The Submissive fanfiction was written even before E.L. James wrote her Twilight fanfiction, and The Submissive was actually what inspired E.L. James to write 50 Shades of Grey. So this book I actually read recently for this video. I knew going in that it was fanfiction. It's a trilogy: The Submissive, The Dominant, The Training, and the original fanfic, the original Twilight fanfic, also had those 3 same names. And the story is like your fairly typical BDSM romance with a rich CEO hero. It is a little different from 50 Shades because the heroine Abby here, she willingly goes into a contract to become the hero's submissive. The book literally opens up with this contract and her agreeing, wanting to be his sub. And of course, the hero is emotionally stunted. He has problem with relationships. The writing here, I mean, it's hard not to compare to 50 Shades, but it was slightly better than the writing in 50 Shades, but the characters were even blander than Anna and Christian, which, I mean, you would think is a pretty hard thing to do, but Nate was just so robotic here. He was so removed and unemotional that by the time I finished the book, I did not know him at all as a character. The heroine herself was totally forgettable, and the amount of sex in this book absolutely killed me. There is at least one sex scene in every single chapter of this book. It was so much, way too much. And the saddest thing was that they weren't even hot. So there was just way too many sex scenes here that it left little room for the romance, which is why I have to put this in E tier because it was not a good book. If you're curious, the sequel to The Submissive, The Dominant, is just a retelling of book one, just from the hero's point of view. I did not read it. I don't ever plan to, but according to reviews, it's probably better to read The Dominant because you get a little bit more insight into the hero than you do in book one. And then of course, I do have to do 50 Shades because it is the iconic Twilight fanfiction turned published novel. It's probably the most famous one of all the books that I'm going to be talking about. I actually read these books quite a while after they grew to fame. I was already way into romance and had already gone through the whole BDSM erotic romance phase, but I finally read them and they weren't the worst books that I've ever read, but they definitely weren't that great either. Like I said earlier, the writing was not good, and I just did not love Anna and Christian in their first book. The original fanfic title of the series was Master of the Universe, and like I said, it was inspired by the submissive fanfic. 50 Shades of Grey was definitely the worst book in the series for me, but I did like it slightly better than the submissive, so it's going in D tier. The next two books I actually did kind of like. I think I gave them 3 stars on Goodreads, so I'll put them here for the kind of liked it tier. I think I mainly like them though for the slightly added angst in books 2 and 3, because if it wasn't for that angst, all 3 books would probably end up in D tier. And then we have another fairly famous book that is known for originating as Twilight fanfiction, an author duo who has talked about writing Twilight fanfiction, a duo who became a duo through Twilight fanfiction, and that is Beautiful Bastard by Christina Lauren. This is the first book in their Beautiful Bastard series, and it's definitely the worst book in the series. I did not love this one. It's an enemies to lovers office romance, but I thought it was really cringy the first time that I read it. It's definitely not as good as Beautiful Stranger or Beautiful Player. The original name of the fanfic was called The Office, which is pretty fitting, and according to the authors, they said only 20% of The Office made it into Beautiful Bastard. So Beautiful Bastard is going into D tier because it was just not that great. Also, I had no idea that they had another Twilight fanfiction written. This one was never actually technically published. It's left on their Wattpad so you can read it for free. It's called A Little Crazy. It's basically a novella about a heroine falling for the new tenant next door. And then we have Transcendence by Shay Savage. After I read this book, I found out that it was Twilight fanfiction. I had no idea before I read it, but most of Shay Savage's books, if not all of them, originated as Twilight fanfiction. It's pretty obvious looking after the fact because the hero's name is Ed, and the heroine, he calls her Beth, short for Beth. So basically Edward and Bella, right? So this one I actually loved. It is one of my favorite time travel romances. The heroine, who's from modern day, she time travels back to the caveman days, and the hero is a legit caveman. I love this one, so it's going in A tier for me, even better than Twilight. I also tried to read another book of hers. This one's a novella called The Handmaid. It is the first novella in the Unexpected Circumstances series. Unexpected Circumstances was actually the original Twilight fanfiction name for the series, but I could barely get through this one. It was not good. The writing was so bad. It's pretty much like a medieval romance with a knight hero. He wins this sort of match for the king, and he offers a marriage of convenience with the heroine, who is a very lowly handmaiden. Another pretty classic Twilight fanfiction turned published book is Wallbanger by Alice Clayton. The original Twilight fanfic was originally called Edward Wallbanger, which is not the best title, but we'll go along with it. It's one of those old school indie romances that got picked up by a publisher, it got picked up by a gallery. It's an enemies to lovers romance between the heroine and her new neighbor, and the hate between them is real. It's actually one of my all-time favorite books. I have reread this book many times, especially back when I first read it. I haven't reread it in a while though, but I still love it. It's one of my favorite enemies to lovers romances. It is ridiculous and over the top. It is rom-com, and there is a lot of ridiculous humor in it. It was honestly so good. I probably would not say no to rereading it today. So I did know that Wallbanger was Twilight fanfiction, although I knew it after I read it. But I had no idea that her other series, Alice Clayton's debut series, the Redhead series, was also Twilight fanfiction. It's a celebrity romance series, and the first two books in the series were originally called I Love LA. The Twilight fanfiction was called I Love LA. It's about an up-and-coming actress heroine who falls for this famous Hollywood actor. I sadly, though, didn't love the series as much as I did Wallbanger. Book 1, The Unidentified Redhead, is definitely a forgettable romance for me, which was really disappointing after how much I loved Wallbanger. But according to Goodreads, I liked book 2 slightly more than book 1, The Redhead Revealed, so I'll put this in C tier. I also read A Pound of Flesh by Sophie Jackson. This one actually got through the publisher after they picked it up. I'm pretty sure the publisher, when they emailed me about it back in my early blogging days, they mentioned that it originated as Twilight fanfiction. So I think I knew going into it that it was fanfiction. It went by the same title, A Pound of Flesh, and I read it because it actually sounded so good. It's a forbidden student-teacher romance set in prison. The heroine teaches at a prison, and she ends up falling for one of her prison students. I actually really like this one. I've enjoyed most of the books, actually all of the books that I've read from Sophie Jackson. I haven't read them all, but the ones I've read I really liked, so this one is going in B tier. I had no idea how I missed that Deborah Anastasia was another Twilight fanfiction author, but she is. I read Poughkeepsie by her, not knowing that it was originally Twilight fanfiction, and I love this book, so I'm putting it in A tier, even better than Twilight, because this book made me feel so many things. I remember how sweet the romance was, like the hero was so romantic, even though he had a really dark and tragic past. The hero here is homeless, and every day he sees the heroine walking to work and he sees her smile at him, and that's how he remembers her. And one day he gets attacked or something like that, and she ends up saving him, and they become friends, and then something more. There's also a really strong family in this book, like the hero and his brothers. There's a really strong bond between them. So this one was great. I really loved Poughkeepsie, and apparently a couple of the other books by this author are also Twilight fanfiction, but this one is the only one that I've read. One of the authors that I was totally shocked by to learn that one book that I've read from her originated as Twilight fanfiction was J.M. Darhauer. I totally missed if she ever said that she originally started writing through Twilight fanfiction, but she did. She's one of my favorite dark romance authors, one of my favorite mafia romance authors, and her book Sempre started as Twilight fanfiction. It's a noodle mafia romance, the first in a duet, but I've only read this first one. The original name of this Twilight fanfic was Emancipation Proclamation, which is pretty intense, but it is a fairly intense book. The hero is the son of this mafia crime boss who ends up buying the heroine. She's a slave, and the father buys her from her former cruel owners. So now she's a slave for the hero's mafia family. So it is fairly dark, and I did enjoy it, even though it's not like my favorite J.M. Darhower book, but it was still pretty good. So that's why I'm putting it in B tier. Another fairly well-known book, well-known series that originated as Twilight fanfiction is Gabriel's Inferno. The Gabriel's Inferno series by Sylvain Reynard. This was originally called The University of Edward Mason. From what I looked up, I think the Twilight fanfic was originally for the first two books, so Gabriel's Inferno and Gabriel's Rapture. I like these books for the most part. They weren't amazing. They're this forbidden professor-student romance series, and I mean, I thought the writing was weird, but I still did enjoy it, kind of. And for the longest time, I, for some reason, thought that the author, that Sylvain Reynard, was a guy. But, I mean, I still don't know who Sylvain Reynard is. But I will put both books in C tier, because I did like them, even though they're not the most amazing books ever. But this series is the only other series besides 50 Shades that ended up being adapted into a movie. I don't know how good they are though. They were adapted by Passionflix, and unlike 50 Shades, I've never seen these movies. If you have watched them though, let me know your thoughts and whether it's worth it to finally get a Passionflix subscription. And I have no idea how I missed it, but Helena Hunting originated as a Twilight fanfic author. Pucked was originally Twilight fanfiction called The Misapprehension of Bella Swan. Basically, it's Twilight turned into a hockey romance. I like Helena Hunting. I've enjoyed most of her books, but Pucked was the only one that I could not get into and could not make it through. I DNF'd this one when I first read it years ago, when it was popular years ago. The characters here were just too silly and sex obsessed that I just didn't find it funny. So this one I kind of have to put in E tier because I just could not get through it. Helena Hunting also had a couple other Twilight fanfics that she ended up publishing. One of them even was acquired by a publisher, which is Clipped Wings. The original Twilight fanfic was called Clipped Wings and Inked Armor. It's this angsty new adult romance that I've never read, so it's going down here. I did, however, read another one of her Twilight fanfics unknowingly, The Librarian Principal, which was originally called The iMac Fiasco, pretty much because the heroine, who works as a librarian at a high school, she's caught by the principal, who is the hero. He finds her stash of porn on her computer and they end up sleeping together. It's fun and silly in a good way, but I wouldn't really put it in B tier. It's not quite as good as those books, so I'll just put it in C tier. This next author is the one that blew my mind the most. Like, I could not believe that she originally wrote Twilight fanfiction and that some of her books were originally Twilight fanfiction. She had to take down 2 of her fanfics in order to publish them, and that is Mariana Zapata. If you know me, you know how much I love Mariana, and I mean, finding out about this doesn't really change how I feel about her or change how I feel about any of these authors, but still, it was pretty shocking to learn about this. And one of her books was Lingus. It was one of the 2 fanfics that she had to take down. It is her debut. It was originally called I Love Mr. North. That was the original fanfic title. It's a porn star romance. The hero is a porn star and the heroine meets him at a porn convention. And the tagline for the original fanfic was, "My name is Isabella Swan and I like porno." I love this one. I love a lot of her earlier stuff that not as many people read. So Lingus is going in A tier. The other Twilight fanfic that she also published and had to take down the fanfic of was Rhythm, Chord, and Malikin. This one is her rockstar romance, another one of her underrated books that I would love if more people read. I mean, she has definitely improved her writing since these earlier books, but there's still something so charming about them that I love. And Rhythm, I definitely love, along with Lingus. The hero is part of a band, the heroine joins them on tour as their merch girl. It's got such a great cast of characters. I would love if Mariana ever revisited them. And this original fanfic was called The Golden Giants Tour. And the third and last Mariana Zapata Twilight fanfic turned published novel is Cruelty. I was so shocked when I found this out because it's my favorite romance book pretty much. I love it, and I was just amazed to find out that it originally started as like 2 chapters of fanfic. You can still read those 2 chapters. She originally wrote 1 chapter about this soccer player, these 2 soccer players in Edward's point of view, and then she wrote a companion chapter to it in Bella's point of view, and those 2 chapters ended up being Cruelty, which is amazing, one of my favorite books of all time, so it is obviously in S tier. And if you want to read the fanfic, the Edward point of view chapter is called A Smokeless Fire, and the Isabella point of view is called A Raging Inferno. Another mafia romance that I enjoyed that originally started as fanfic was Ruthless People by J.J. McAvoy. This book I only read earlier this year, but I really enjoyed it. It's a marriage of convenience, a mafia romance. They are rival mafia families who have to marry to form an alliance. There's lots of action and violence, and I really liked it, so it's going in B tier. I had no idea that it was Twilight fanfic, but the author was really vocal about it back then. When I went to look it up, she was super obsessed with Twilight and even had a whole website dedicated to Ruthless People and Twilight. Another book that I read that I don't think a lot of people have read is The Plan by Gwen Salisbury. This book was quite the quirky book, mainly because of the writing. It's an office romance, an office rom-com. The heroine is obsessed with a hero who is this asshole boss, and she comes up with a plan to get closer to him and ends up being his personal assistant. So this is basically a rom-com with an obsessive heroine, which was really interesting to read. But I'll put it in C tier because I don't really remember too much about it, except that I did like it. There's also a stepbrother romance series that I have read and enjoyed that was originally about Edward and Bella. It's the Need series by K.I. Lin and N. Isabel Blanco. So this series came up back when stepbrother romances were very, very popular. It's a trilogy and I really liked all three books, especially book 2. The Twilight fanfic also went by the name Need, and it's more similar to Culty, where it originated as just a chapter long. It wasn't like a full-blown fanfic as far as I could tell, and that one chapter turned into a 3-book published series about these 2 characters whose parents ended up getting married. They were very, very close to starting up a relationship, and then they had to stop after they became step siblings. So Need book 1 for me, I really liked it. I'm putting it in B tier. And then book 2, Take, I have to put in A tier because I loved it so much. The hero basically just grovels the entire book. And then book 3 is Own, and I'll put it in B tier along with book 1. I also read another K.I. Lin book, not knowing it was originally Twilight fanfiction. It's Welcome to the Cameo Hotel, which I read earlier this year. This one was very okay for me, pretty forgettable, so I put it in D. It takes place in this hotel. The hero is this gigantic asshole who's renting a room at the hotel. The heroine is one of the workers, and he always singles her out to get her to help him, but he's pretty much a jerk about it, so I wasn't a big fan of him. And the third book by K.I. Lin, which I just read, was Becoming Mrs. Lockwood. This one is a we accidentally got married in Vegas kind of romance. It's got an age gap with a 31-year-old hero who used to be a famous Hollywood actor and an 18-year-old heroine who is still in high school. This one was a really strange read because the heroine is still in the middle of high school. She's not even about to graduate, and it was so freaking long. Like, oh my god. It was 16 hours in audio, which was twice as long as it needed to be. Like, if it ended at 8 hours, I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more, but I have to put it in D tier because I was so annoyed by how long it was. Also, both books ended up being super mature in the book, so they did match each other, but I didn't like them very much. The original Twilight fanfic name of Becoming Mrs. Lockwood is Me and Mr. Cullen. There are quite a few celebrity Twilight fanfics that turned into published novels, which I shouldn't really be too surprised by. This next one has another Hollywood actor. It's Bad Romeo by Lisa Raven. It's actually a 3-book series, but the first 2 books were the original Twilight fanfics. These 2 were originally called The Diva Diaries. So it's Bad Romeo and Broken Juliet. These 2 books I sadly did not like. I read them years ago and was so disappointed by them. We've got a doormat heroine and an asshole hero, which makes for the worst combo. So this second chance romance has a hero who went off to become this famous Hollywood actor. He broke the heroine's heart, and now he's finally back to win her heart. It's set in the theater. They're doing some theater production, but I just did not like these characters, so putting them in E, both of them. Surprisingly though, I did really like book 3 way more than the first 2 books, so if you want to try this author, I would just try book 3. Another book on my list is Getting Rough by C.L. Parker. This is book 2 in the Monkey Business series, and I had absolutely no idea that it was book 2 in a series when I first read it. Back when I first released, the publisher emailed me about it, so I thought I'd give it a try, and I remember how confused I was when I first read it. It felt like I was missing something, and yeah, I just completely missed the entire first book. The series title Monkey Business was the original Twilight fanfiction name. This is about two enemy sports agents, and I'm wondering if the whole monkey business thing came from the movies, if it was inspired by the spider monkey quote from Twilight. But I'll put this one in D tier because I was just so dumb. I didn't even read book 1, so I set myself up for failure. And the last book that I read specifically for this video just a couple of days ago, is Seduction and Snacks by Tara Sivec. This book has been on my TBR for literally years. I've heard really good things about it, but when I read it, I just could not get through it. It's pretty much like Pucked again for me. It was just way too over the top and ridiculous. I did not vibe with the humor. There was way too much rambling from the heroine, who is a single mom who got pregnant from a one-night stand in college. She was never able to find the hero to tell him that they have a son, and about 4 years later, they finally see each other again, and she tells him that they had a baby all those years ago. This book was originally called The Vagina Monologues, which is fairly fitting because the heroine is now selling sex toys along with baked goods. I have to put this one in E tier because I pretty much stopped at 40% and just skimmed the rest of the book. The pacing was so slow. It took forever for her to tell the hero that they have a baby, they have a toddler now. This book was just not my taste, no pun intended. Also, the son had such a bad potty mouth that it just made the story even more unbelievable and harder to get into. So this is my ranking for all the books that I've read that originated in some way as Twilight fanfiction, whether it's like a full-blown fanfic or just a chapter. But I do want to mention a couple others that I haven't read that sound pretty interesting. Okay, so this first one is interesting in a bad way though. It's Black Keys by Rose B. Marshall. It's about a Muslim Arab prince and a young Catholic American heroine. So it's interracial, and the series is called Colorblind, so already it has me hesitant, very hesitant and suspicious, and I went to look through the reviews on Goodreads, and yeah, it turns out this book was not great. There's some racism and Islamophobia in this one, so probably should avoid. For some books that do actually sound good, there's A Dirty Lion by Faye Bird, which is an MC Twilight fanfic, Motorcycle Club, and also the heroine wants to sell her virginity. Held Against You by Season Vining has a heroine on the run, and the hero is a bounty hunter trying to hunt her down. And there's a freaking pirate Twilight fanfic called Cutlass by T.M. Franklin. The hero is an actual pirate with an actual eye patch, and the heroine, she sneaks onto his ship to get revenge against him, but it turns out he's innocent, and they both go on this treasure hunt to find a missing cutlass. There's also a ton of Shay Savage books. There's an underground fighter one called Takedown Teague, Surviving Rain, which I do actually want to read. It's a survival romance. This one was originally called Surviving Bella. The main characters both were on a ship and they capsized, and now they're stuck on a raft. Offside by Shay Savage is a soccer romance set in high school, and another Tara Sivec book called A Beautiful Lie, which was originally called Turning Tables. It's pretty much a love triangle between three best friends, and one of the guys ends up dying. And that is my tier ranking list of every single published book that originated as Twilight fanfiction that I've read so far. If you, for some reason, want to use this tier ranking list, I'll leave a link to it down below. I'll also leave links to all the books that I mentioned down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!